Emotions in our hearts, shit what us in our balls. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. The world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking, with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Greetings, 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 ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for spending this Saturday evening. Time is precious. Time is the only resource, as I like to say. And thank you for spending this time with us today. For those whom are live, shout out to Nicer, shout out to D, shout out to Aaron B in the house. And for those who will be listening later on, thank you for spending the time. So it's not often that one gets to talk, one gets to converse, have a conversation with a spearheader of a movement, if you will. And I'm excited to be doing that today. Um, if there is someone whom does not require any introduction, especially in this space that we're in, it will be the guest today. It would be the old man. It would be Mumia Obsidian Ali himself. So, without further ado, without much introduction, I hereby introduce to you, or let him introduce himself, the celebrated and venerated, honorable public intellectual of the manosphere himself, author of best-selling book in Amazon in the sexuality category, I believe. So, how's it going, Mumia? How's it going over there in Philadelphia? I'm assuming you're in Philly right now. I believe you're muted if you are speaking.
Oh, there we go. I never get used. Never get quite get used to Streamyard. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm over here in Philly, man. How you doing?
I am doing very well out here in the Bay Area of California. So let's get right into it. Why the name Obsidian? Why did you pick that rock? Something having to do with it being black or something? Or why the name Obsidian?
I didn't pick it. Someone picked it for me. And obsidian isn't a rock; it's volcanic glass.
Ah. Mm-hmm. So it is okay. Okay. Could you explain to us the difference in that categorization there between okay, so it's volcanic glass, so it's been smelted by volcanic action. Why is it not a volcanic rock, therefore?
Yeah, it's a lot of people kind of mistake obsidian for like a mineral, like onyx, a rock, or similar types of black rocks. But obsidian is actually volcanic glass, and it was given to me because I was told that I kind of embody properties of obsidian, very sharp and piercing, and a lot going on beneath the surface.
Sharp, piercing, and a lot going on beneath the surface. Okay, now that's interesting right there. So now I know a little bit about your background based on just what you put out there. You talk about coming from a family of business people. You talk about being in the trades and so on and so forth. Would you mind, for those of us whom are not completely versed in your background, just kind of sharing your history vis-a-vis how you came up, perhaps role models in a positive and negative way, and also why the trades? Why did you pick the trades? So background, role models, trades.
Yeah, I grew up here in Philly. I was born and raised here, and my mom was a nurse. My dad was a tradesman. And why did I pick the trades? Well, it was more like trades picked me. I started out at a real young age working out in the trades. I started around year 7, there about being a gopher for my dad. He was a contractor, and he had his own business. So around 7 years old, I kind of got dragooned into working with him as a gopher. I started out, sweeping up and carrying his tool bucket, carrying his tool belt, getting various tools for him and stuff like that. And that's how it all got started. And I went from there. And after about basically 10 years of de facto apprenticing underneath him, then after I got out of high school, I went straight into the trades, as a profession in its own right. I got out of high school in June. July, I started working on my own and never looked back.
So your father, what you would say, was a role model in your life, therefore?
Very much so. Yeah.
Were there
Very
any negative role models or any uncles out there that you did not want to be like?
No, the men in my family were all pretty, decent guys. I mean, none of them were perfect. But they were all pretty, decent guys. So I didn't have anybody in my family that was so wayward that, I just didn't want to be like them at all. They were all pretty, solid men. I do come from a long line of churchmen. A lot of my uncles and and so forth. My grandfather was a deacon in the church, and I had an uncle that was a pastor. I had several other, cousins and whatnot. They were churchmen of varying stripes. So I do have that. And
I see.
but they were all pretty good people. They weren't like I didn't have any ne'er do wells in my family like that.
I see. I see. Now, I said something there in the introduction that perhaps I should ask you about. I said a public intellectual. Now, I chose that phrase. I don't think I've ever heard you refer to yourself as that, and perhaps it's not the kind of thing that one refers to oneself as, right? Um, but let me go ahead and ask you: have you always considered yourself, or has that always been a target to be a public intellectual? It is a particular mode of presentation, right? When it comes to being in the media. And I think that it does fit your style, your way of speaking. You having written this book, and congratulations again, bestseller on Amazon.
Thank you.
Um, from the trades to public intellectual. Now, the whole public intellectual aspect of things, or you could give there are other ways, like you could say, oh, I've always loved books or whatever it may be. But was there anything from your past that always pointed in that direction?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked. That's a very good question because recently, my lady friend and I were having a conversation about this, and I always was under the impression that first of all, in order to be a public intellectual, you had to be an intellectual defined as, um, being formally educated and having some degree of distinction in the academy.
Hmm.
And she's a pretty sharp lady in her own right. And while she didn't disagree with what I said,
Hmm.
she said, you do have a point, but I think you're kind of being a bit limited in in that regard, because that's not the only way a person becomes a public intellectual. It is one way, but it's not the only way. She said, I would consider you every bit a public intellectual. And she, went into the reasons why. And and this was, before the book, became the
Mm.
big smash hit it is right now. And so she was like, you've been writing about these things for years. And then on top of that, podcasting about them and speaking about a variety of topics and stuff like that. And she said, I very much consider you a man of letters. So,
I see.
and a public intellectual based on
So,
actual work in real time.
now I'm assuming you're familiar with Christopher Hitchens, right? The late
Oh,
Christopher
absolutely. The
Hitchens.
late great Hitch. Yeah,
You would consider him a public intellectual, right?
sure. I certainly would.
And he was not Mr. I made some specific contributions in the field of economics in my PhD, blah, blah, blah. I
No,
think a lot of public intellectuals come out of journalism to put in a certain kind of way. Now, it's polemical journalism, editorial kind of journalism, and so on and so forth. But I think you're right there in line with them, right? So why was there the hesitation? Why the humility? Why the adding of this extra layer of, oh, I have to be formally educated and so on and so forth? Is it perhaps a chip on your shoulder, sir?
yeah, well, yeah, a number of people kind of typify me as having something to prove, including my lady friend. She's always like, you always got something to prove. So yeah, I guess there is a bit of that. And then I went back and looked up the whole thing with the public intellectual. As it turns out, she was right. There are a number of people who had, they've debated and hashed it out, and especially in the context of the 21st century, where social media is such a ubiquitous force now that there's been a suggestion or a proposition put forward that we need to look at a public intellectual and the role of a public intellectual and what makes one a public intellectual in a bit of a different light than we did in the past. So yeah.
Mm. After all, uh, media, shall we say, or mediums of dissemination of information is just that, right? A medium. It's nothing particularly holy about the newspaper or being in the editorial page of the New York Times. It's just, after all, a medium, right?
Yeah.
And the the medium is the message in certain regard, as you know that particular, and also the mechanisms by which one is vetted through is dependent upon the medium itself. However, it is still just a medium, right? So perhaps it may be the case that, if you're the New York Times, then, there's only there's limited space, right? And, there's only one New York Times. So fewer people are going to get in there. And just by the numbers, there's going to be prestige associated with it due to the rareness of the people whom get to fill those spaces. But I don't know. Yeah, that's a good observation there. That social media is just another form of media out there, and hence why not. So I also mentioned one of the spearheaders of a movement. Now, because it is often mentioned, Obsidian, O'Shea, and Angry Man, and of course you got to give Solo TV 84 his due before he comes for me and be like, oh my God, what's this? Shout out to Solo TV 84.
Pretty
So
cool.
yeah, he's a cool dude. Do you feel any sense of responsibility, either that you have consciously accepted or that which is hoisted upon you as a spearheader of what may be considered a movement out here in this sector of YouTube? In other words, responsibility writ large, as you may, just consider that term responsibility as a spearheader, something perhaps that you've consciously accepted, and what you think about that which is perhaps hoisted or bestowed upon you by others.
Yeah, that's a question I've given a lot of. I spent a lot of midnight oil, burning
Mm,
about over the past few years. Um, I didn't set out thinking I was going to, be part of, founding a movement or anything like that. But the truth of the matter is that yeah, I am kind of a co-founder of sorts of a somewhat of a movement, and with the perks come the responsibilities. So I do feel responsible, at least in part, for what the black manosphere is today. Responsibility to do my part to kind of steer it in what I think is the right direction. Yeah.
mm-hmm. So you okay? Now, is this something that where is the do you accept all the responsibility that is bestowed upon you, or what exactly is your definition, or which kind of responsibility have you voluntarily accepted? While you ponder on that question, let's go ahead and give a shout out to my man, the lead attorney. I had a great conversation with him. Um, my last video, I believe that was 2 days ago. It could be yesterday. I don't know. I'm losing track of time. No, it was on Thursday evening. Shout out, $100 super chat, $100 super chat for my man, the lead attorney. Says there is nothing better than the Serious Brothers coming together. Indeed, indeed, indeed. So I also have another from the technological chaos. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much for the $8 super chat. And shout out to Dr. Thunder as well. Another round of applause to you as well, sir. Let me read what you say here. You say, congratulations, Bumuya Obsidian Ali. Okay. On best-selling book. Yes, yes, yes. I can now say that I've interviewed a best-selling author. So I'm out here clout chasing, as they say. I am clout chasing unabashedly 100%. So I was asking you, what exactly is the nature of the responsibility that you're willing to accept? And is there any that has come at you, voiced perhaps towards you, that said that you reject, that you say, you know what, it is not my place to be responsible for that, blah, blah, blah. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. Again, these are questions I've been thinking about myself for quite some time. The first, I do feel responsibility, especially now that I mean, no conversation about the black manosphere in our time right now can be had without recognizing the juggernaut that is Kevin Samuels. He just crossed the 1 million um, subscriber count here on YouTube, and he's not that far behind over on Instagram. Um, I do feel that, and as such, as the old saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. So as he continues to get attention around the world, so too by extension does the black manosphere. And I'm very concerned with how we look to the rest of the world, what our message is to the rest of the world, how we're
Mm.
perceived by the rest of the world. And leaders lead from the front, and that all starts with me. So I've been giving a lot of thought lately to how I'm going to do things moving forward, how I'm
Hmm.
going to look, how I'm going to sound, what message I'm going to present, and so forth.
Hmm. I see. I see. I see. I see. So, and we'll get deeper into that. So you are concerned with it. You said that you've thought about it. This is something that you're saying, how we are perceived and so on and so forth. So it seems like you've taken on a lot of the responsibility. You're not shirking it. You're not pushing it aside. You're not saying, "Hey, I'm just out here." Anyways, we're gonna get into those kinds of things more specifically. Now, why? How did you, from the trades, end up in YouTube? What was the impetus for that?
How did I do to get into the trades into YouTube?
No, how did you go from the trades to
Oh,
YouTube?
oh, that was
Not that they're mutually exclusive or anything,
right.
but just a timeline, if you will.
Yeah, that was real easy. So like I said, I started out, professionally, in my own right in the trades after spending a lot of years, being a de facto apprentice to my dad and his men.
Hmm.
18 years old, and at the age of 40, a couple months after my 40th birthday, and after clocking in at the usual time, 7 o'clock, about 9 minutes after 7, I took a bad step, and that ended my 22-year career. Took a bad step, classic slip and fall, severely damaged my back, and that ended the 22-year career in the trades, and completely turned my life upside down. So one day I was in bed, because I was pretty much bedridden, um, and I had my laptop on my chest, and I was tooling around, looking around, and I stumbled on something called WorldNet Daily,
Hmm.
and it had a gentleman on there by the name of Paul Elam who was
Hmm.
writing for them, and he was like this men's rights advocate type, and I had never heard
I
of
see.
anything like this before. So I was reading his articles, and I found them to be pretty interesting and compelling. And that one article led me to another, and it kind of tumbled down a rabbit hole. And I came across other people like Rorsi in DC. He would go on to become known as Chateau Hartiste, another gentleman by the name of Rouge V. That
Hmm.
led to another gentleman by the name of Rollo Tomasi, who's really big
Hmm.
on YouTube. And at the same time, Paul Elam would go on to found A Voice for Men. And I would find out about Dr. Warren Farrell from him. Dr. Warren Farrell really played a big role in my early development, because he talked about how men, from an evolutionary standpoint, are disposable. In order to get things done in our world, you have to have men willing to sacrifice themselves, soldiers, workers, stuff like that. And all that really resonated with me. And so that's how all got started. I was
Hmm.
looking at all that, and I was, to be brutally frank, I was kind of depressed at the time.
Hmm.
Um, and then a crazy idea hit me, um, that I could be a writer about
Hmm.
this manosphere stuff. Because I did notice one thing. I mean, I liked everything that I was reading, but I noticed that there was nothing coming from a black male perspective. And I saw it, I didn't see it as a bad thing. I saw it as an opportunity. I said, man, great
Opportunity.
thing.
Hmm.
So I said, well, what I'll do is I'll be a writer. And I never did that before. Um, and that's, I set out on it. It's funny, my lady friend at the time, I shared with her this idea, and she thought that I had like a third eye in the middle of my head. And she said, she was like, okay, you're going to do this. I just want one thing. I said, what's that? I need you to be successful at it. So here we are years later.
I see. I see. I see. Shout out to Snuggles. Shout out to Snuggles, the $5 super chat, the $5 super chat god, goddess, or AI bot, whatever it might be. Shout out to you, Snuggles. Says, congratulations on your ally hitting 1 million subs. And right about when you were acknowledging that fact is when she indeed sent the super chat. So, and also she was asking something about what I was writing down. I'm writing the name of Warren Farrell. Now, I noticed that you tend to let's say Dr. Jim Buss and so on, other things such as that, which you tend to reference, okay, people when you talk. You name drop in a certain way, not in a bad way, but I'm sure you know what I mean. I'm saying the name drop in tongue in cheek, but you tend to reference when you speak. You almost the name escapes me now in terms of the what you
Oh,
have
you
in
mean
terms of
Dr. David Buss?
Dr. David Buss. No, not Jim Buss. Dr. David Buss, and you mentioned Warren Fowler and so on and so forth. You tend to reference people when you is that something that you actively do? And also, I was writing the name of Warren Fowler. You're talking about the disposable, and that's striking you. Now, and most men also, obviously, in history, don't reproduce. That's just kind of the name of the game. Men
Yeah,
are fodder, right? The 80-20 rule is just has always existed
that's
for
true.
various reasons. Men are subjugated by other men. Hence that whole notion of, oh my God, women are subjugated. It's like, if you want to look at it, is that, if what is biological success? Biological success would be, after all, being able to pass your genes on to the future. And women tend to do that rather successfully, way more than men. So if you want to talk about who's successful biologically and who was subjugated and thrown into the fodder or the ash heap of history, it tends to be men. Not that anyone is complaining about that, because it's just no Bravo Alpha November type spirit here. But two questions that are associated with that there. While you were mentioning the name of Warren Fowle, I know it came to mind that you speak in that way in terms of referencing what you are referencing, if you will, the literature and those whom write in order to buttress the points that you're making. Hence the whole moniker of public intellectual, because that is a public intellectual mode of presenting oneself, right? And
Right.
then also, what about the disposability of men and so on and so forth struck you? You said that struck you. How did it strike you, and so on and so forth? And is this particular mode of speaking something that you do on purpose?
Yeah, well, okay. Well, with regard to the name dropping thing, I never. It's not a conscious thing on my part. I don't look the name drop. I'm trying to give the audience or whoever I'm speaking to a source of where I got my ideas from, where I got my information from. So I do it for that reason. It's not because of I'm trying to name drop. This with regard to what struck me about male disposability. Well, like I said, I had just been grievously injured, and my life turned upside down, and I had an intense court battle over getting my compensation and stuff like that, and I felt that I was kind of like thrown under the bus by my job, and that's what really struck me about it. It was really there was a movie series of movies that came out some years back called the Bourne Identity, Bourne Legacy, and in one of the movies, Clive Owen, who is a member of Operation Treadstone, which is the operation that created Jason Bourne. Toward the end, one of the movies, he's dying in the field. He and Jason Bourne kind of had a confrontation, and he looks at Jason Bourne while he's dying and said, "Look at us, look at what they make you give," and I could really kind of resonate with that. Look at us, look at what they make you give, man. And I kind of gave it all on the floor, and I mean, I eventually did get my compensation and stuff like that. I fought the case, and my lawyers helped me win it, but it was really disillusioning to kind of be cast aside when you was no longer useful anymore. And that was it was very deeply hurtful and painful on the one side, but it was also very jarring, and what Warren Farrell had to say about it was pretty profound.
I see. Now I see the connection. I see the connection. Yeah, you had that laptop on your chest. You said you were quite depressed, and then you started digging, found people whom shed some light, gave some intellectual depth into what you were going through, right? And then you started writing, right? So where did you write? What platform and in what forum did you start? And then how did you translate that into YouTube?
Yeah, so I got started with a little small, WordPress blog. I started with that, and I was also a frequent commenter in places like Rossi and DC's blog, and that led me, to some other, manosphere adjacent websites and stuff to be a commenter, and that led to a lot of people saying, "Man, you're pretty good. You should write for, this website, that website." And so I contacted a few of them. One of the early ones was an outfit called the Spearhead. So I contacted them, and the owner of the website really liked what I had to say. So I started writing there. I ended up writing at the Good Men Project. I ran a blog called Just For Guys. I ran that for a while. Let me see. I ended up writing for A Voice for Men, Return of Kings.
Hmm.
Uh, I wrote for pretty much in Malafide. That's our outfit that's no longer around. But I ended up writing pretty much for every major manosphere website at the time. This would have been in the late aughts
Hmm.
through much of the 2010s. And as a matter of fact, I'm still I still remain the only writer of any color, but it's a nice feather in the cap to be a black man to write for both A Voice for Men and Return of Kings. I'm the only one that's ever done that, and also hold the distinction of having the single biggest, largest interview with Roosh V in print over at A Voice for Men.
I see. By the way, is Rollo Tomasi's book in the same category, the category of sexuality, as your book?
Yes, it would be. He and I deal with very
Ah.
similar topics. Rollo Tomasi is a really deep, dense guy.
Hmm.
And even when I read his writing, I have to kind of sit down after a while and kind of gather myself. His writing is not
Hmm.
for the weak of heart or the timid, man. My writing is more conversational.
Hmm.
I've been
Hmm.
told, but his writing is much more. He comes closer to an academic than I do in that respect.
I see. I see. So the subtitle of the book is A Manual for the 21st Century Black American Gentleman. Okay. What is the significance of the word gentleman? You didn't just say man, you said gentleman. And that must have been, how did that come about in terms of just how it came about? And
Yeah.
then what is the significance of using that word?
Well, so I was having a conversation. Kevin and I. Kevin's mentioned in the book, and I call him Saint Kevin. And he and I had a conversation off list, so to speak, one day. And this would have been back in 2018. And I asked him just off the cuff. I said, "Let me ask you a question, man, because you talk a lot about style and the importance of black male image and guys needing to give some thought about how they present themselves to the world." I said, "Well, let me ask you a question. What? Because he had said at the time, and he's repeated it since, that there are three major style
Hmm.
uh, templates:
Hmm.
refined, rakish, and rogue." Right.
Hmm.
So I said, "Well, what do you think I fall into one of that schema?" And without skipping a beat, he said, "Refined."
Hmm.
He said a lot of people may not see it that way because they don't see the inner you. They only see
Hmm.
the outer you. He said style is a fact, not a function of just merely putting something on.
Hmm.
It has to be a function of bringing something that's on the inside that's already there out.
Yes.
And he said, you're a gentleman on the inside. A lot of people don't see it that way, but you're a gentleman already on the inside. You just have to bring it out.
I see. Now, why would people not otherwise see that? Is it the trades? Is it Philly? What was it?
All of the above. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. I think a lot of us, we live in a carnal world. We live in a world of the senses.
Mhm.
In the social media age, like never before, we live in a world of the visual. So, yeah, we go very much on what we see, and that can be and often is quite deceiving. So I sat down and took what he said to heart about that and thought about it, and that's when I decided to make a big change in how I look, and
Mhm.
that's the result that you see on the screen right now. And I never look back.
Hmm. Mhm. Yes. So, image. How does image weave in to your project, if you will? Not that we've particularly defined your project, but perhaps we may start to see the different threads that kind of form the embroidery. And is image one of these threads? How important is it in terms of the image of the black man, if you will? How does
Very.
that play into? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it was very important. As a matter of fact, I kind of looked at it as a social experiment, and I was shocked to see the kind of results that I got. It's funny. I always say to people, me and my lady friend talk about this a lot. What was really interesting about me changing my outer appearance. Now, I got started doing what I did because my concern was with the state of affairs between black men and black women. And I had often pretty withering critiques of what I saw was problematic about black women. And I had become kind of known for that up until that point. But what I found was when I changed how I looked, that the black women's reaction was like completely. It took me off guard. Number one, I didn't expect that to happen. They just got real quiet. I used to get a lot of flack from black women, understandably so. I mean, I had a lot of very outspoken critiques, and that kind of ran me and it got me in trouble with a number of somewhat notable black women online. But
Mhm.
what I have found is when I changed up my appearance, um, all of that stopped. They just got real quiet. And but the other interesting thing is that a lot of black men got really, outspoken, and not necessarily in a good way. So I could kind of relate to what Kevin kind of goes through. I remember one day, and this was in the fall of 2018. So I was watching a video at the time of Kevin. He was doing like a live stream, and he was talking about the importance of image for guys and whatnot. And brothers were savaging him in the chat room comments. They were just savaging him. I mean, and it was all coming from black men, so he couldn't lay this at the feet of black women. And I was sitting there
Mhm.
looking at it all, and I said to myself, you're about to be 50 soon.
Mhm.
And whether you like it or not, you're one of the founding fathers of this thing. And by definition, you're one of the de facto leaders of this thing. And you have made a day-to-day business of this thing. I mean, this is how you know, make your daily bread. You are a business, among other things, you are a businessman now, and it's time to start looking like one.
Mhm.
So I just got up.
Mhm.
I kind of had a Paul on the road to Damascus moment, I guess you could call it. And I got up from my chair and I called me a lift and I turned off the computer and I went downtown and got fitted for a tailored suit that you see in the picture right there. And I never looked back. But it was
100%.
interesting.
100%.
The ladies got real quiet, but it was the brothers that, kind of savaged me after that.
Yeah. And perhaps we'll get or not because I mean the psychology of why they would do that is not so. In other words, it's not a deep mystery as to why a particular cohort of people would be against you because you are demolishing, you're breaking rank, coming out in a particular way, which because they have a particular image, because they tend to focus a lot on the superficial aspect of image, by the way. And then if you break that rank, they come for you because, how dare you do that? And are you making a judgment against me? There's a lot of projection that goes on, right? You do your thing, and all of a sudden they're saying, "Are you saying you're better than me?" And blah 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 blah. And there is a proverb, and it does tie into what you're saying in the sense that, okay, well, the women kind of calmed down, the men started acting up. There is an African proverb that says, if you go to a village and you find no good women around, then it is a village filled with no good men. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. It does. There's been a lot of discussion in Black social media circles, particularly, the Black manosphere has been kind of like acting as a kind of lightning rod and a kind of magnet for a number of people. So we kind of have these conversations. And the argument goes that if Black men just led properly, Black women will kind of fall in line. I'm a bit skeptical about that. But I also have to admit that there may be a ring of truth to it. I'm not prepared to go jump in with both feet, but there is a ring of truth to it.
Yeah, not every reaction is reversible, right? Not every line of logic is reversible, right? It doesn't necessarily mean, in other words, it may be absolutely true that no good women around, that means because there's no good men. It doesn't mean all of a sudden that in other words, the solution might be burn it down and start afresh. In other words, it's not like, oh, if you just flipped it, not every reaction, chemical reaction is reversible, right? So I 100% agree with you there, that you can agree with one side without necessarily then making the opposite. Very good point. So is your project reactionary, even if we stay within this particular line, this particular thread of image? Is it a reactionary one? Is it one that says, I am pushing against the image of Black men that is out there? I am saying what Black men is not, right? Or do you have a positive image, a positive, tangible image that you're trying to put out there into the world, regardless, irrespective of what may be conceived as being the wrong image? Are you protesting against the wrong image? Or do you have something positive that you say, hey, what I'm doing is I'm putting this forward and this is it. I'm not saying something is not or whatever. I don't care what's out there, but I'm putting this forward. What would you say your project mainly involves?
It'll definitely be more the latter. I see what I'm doing as kind of like a statement on something I've seen over the years and something that Kevin is speaking to more recently. And that is, a lot of Black men are afraid of change. And we live in a time of great change. And the pace of change is very rapid, and it's kind of coming from all sides. And it can be very disorienting, the sense of whiplash. But I kind of want to, present the idea that it's never too late to reinvent yourself. And you can always begin again. You try something and it doesn't work, that's okay. You can try something else. You can do something else and keep trying stuff until you find something that clicks. I think that's what I want to send out more than anything else, is that it's okay for guys like that. I mean, that's the story of my life. I went from one state of being to a whole nother state of being. Now I literally reinvented myself. And that started well before I put on a tailored suit. That was, I had a broken body, and I'm kind of reminded. I was a kid. I don't know if you know about this, like, because you're not homegrown. That is to say, native, Black American. But here in the United States, there was a TV show. You might have heard of it. There was a TV show in the 1970s called The $6 Million Man, right? And the whole premise behind this. You ever heard of this?
I heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't watched it or anything, but I just kind of heard of it. It's the butt of many jokes and such and things like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, you could look it up on YouTube. The whole idea behind the show, and I was a big fan of that. And when I was a kid, and because I was always into technology and futuristic type of stuff. So the whole premise behind the show was you had this man named Steve Austin, who was and by the way, back in the 70s, the big trend back then was being an astronaut. I was really into that. I wanted to be an astronaut and all that, Tang, the orange drink Tang and all that sort of thing. I had my rockets and all that sort of thing. So the premise was that Steve Austin was this test pilot, and he was testing out this new futuristic type rocket ship, but the test went horribly wrong, and he wound up being grievously injured. And a secret agency, of the government, today we call this sort of thing the dark web and all that sort of thing, the deep state and that sort of thing. But back then there was this secret, agency of the government, stepped in, and it says in the beginning credits of the show, we have the technology, we can rebuild him, bigger, faster, stronger, so. And they worked on him with these, special technological innovations, and they grafted on him bionic cybernetic parts and stuff like that. So I use that metaphor for myself because I had to learn to walk again in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go through grueling, almost a year of grueling therapy, very painful and very it was very humbling, and I had to learn how to do a lot of things. I had to learn how to adjust to a new life. I remember my doctors telling me they didn't want to operate on me. They were very apprehensive about doing that because they said, back injuries, back operations are very delicate things. They can go very right or they can go very wrong. I mean, and because I was relatively young at the time, it's okay. We can work around this, but in order for you to do that, you're going to have to change your whole lifestyle. And interestingly enough, I just thought that it was just, I'm no longer going to be able to do what I used to do and stuff like that. When changing lifestyle, it means everything. Like, for example, I'm the de facto vegetarian today. I can't, because, red meat and processed meats, wreak havoc on my back injuries, so I can't do that. And it's eased things a lot. But the trick is, I remember my therapist telling me, and my doctors, they told the same thing. They said, you're going to now have your own built-in weather service. I said, what do you mean? And they explained it. Barometric pressure is the weight of the atmosphere, right? The weight, literally the weight of the world. And when the barometric pressure is above normal, right? In other words, it's heavier than normal. Your joints and the material in between your joints will contract. And people like me will be very sensitive to that, and it'll be very, very painful. On the other hand, and people will know about this, storms and like hurricanes is a form of a storm. Hurricanes, storms, that's when they tend to occur when the barometric pressure is very low. In other words, the weight of the atmosphere gets very, very light. And when that happens, your joints and the material between them expands, and that's very painful. So what ends up happening is that I could tell when it's about to rain because of the pain. I could tell when it shifts in barometric pressure, and I can perceive storms occurring as far away. I'm in Philly, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I could perceive storms as far away as Georgia. Yeah. So I had to kind of rebuild myself, and I guess that's kind of like the story of my life is kind of rebuilding myself and reinventing myself. So I guess the story for me, for other men, is that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, and it's never too late to begin again. You can start over again. I think a lot of black men are afraid of trying new things because they're afraid of failing. And I failed a lot. I got up and tried to walk. I was watching right here on YouTube. I was watching a documentary about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and a lot of people didn't know it at the time. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt ran the country and guided the country through its most tumultuous time, the Great Depression and then World War II, from a wheelchair. People didn't know that. I mean, he arranged it so that the American press would not, take pictures of him in his wheelchair. They played along with him because they understood that it was important for the country to see Franklin Delano Roosevelt as a strong and competent man, and so they would not take pictures of him while he was in his wheelchair. But but uh, but he when he ran for president, he had trained himself to the point where he had polio, and it affected his legs. He had trained himself to be able to get along or walk across the stage with a cane. And he did it. And people were convinced that, he had the polio or whatever, but he bounced back, and he's not, a cripple, as they used to call it back in the day. He's now just lame. He just walked with a cane. So that was very deep to me. Being technically disabled, I'm technically disabled. It's not as bad as it sounds in most cases. I do have my days, but it's given me a unique insight into the human condition, being disabled, technically, and it's given me a lot more compassion than I would have had. It's given me another way of looking at things. And it's made me a lot more circumspect, a lot more made me a lot more contemplative about
contemplative, introspective. It made you a writer.
Yeah. It gave me a lot more time to think about things, and
I see.
And how to overcome things. My thinking was, if I'm going to walk with a cane pretty much for the rest of my days, then they're going to be some of the sexiest canes around. And you see one right there in the picture. So
interesting. Yeah, this is a sharp, orthogonal little branching off here. But that book on Roosevelt and the fact how he was able to cover, if you will, his disability. Any thoughts as to the value of transparency, or the value, shall we say, of being opaque? Because here's one thing. And you can comment on it as you will. As I said, it's just a sharp little jump. We just kind of taking a little branch off here, and we'll get back on the main road. Because obviously you see where I'm going here, right? It was necessary for the country, apparently, or maybe it was all in his mind, or maybe it was indeed necessary to see the president in a certain light. And he was able to protect that, keep a certain amount of opacity. In other words, prevent a certain amount of transparency. And I do believe that transparency in certain regards tends to lead to bad things. People think, oh, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Oh, open up the light and let's shine it every little corner. What transparency tends to do sometimes in one particular regard is it leads to groupthink. In other words, if everyone is looking over your shoulder, just imagine that, right? You're in a committee, you're supposed to be thinking about something, you're supposed to come up with a particular solution, and the whole press and everyone is looking over your shoulder. What tends to happen? Groupthink tends to happen. That's just one example of how transparency can lead to bad things. Another example is, perhaps you need to control, a la Plato, the noble lie type of tool when used in politics, right? You're able to control perception, and this idea that you just open up everything is not all that it is cut out to be. I mean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that FDR's story is very important. People would say, well, honesty is the best policy. That there's a caveat with that. The country at the time was they were already dealing with a whole lot, and then you got to instill confidence in people. And I understood why he did it, and I think that was the right decision to do what he did. And his legacy speaks for itself. I think that there are times when everybody don't need to know what's going on, in the kitchen. There are times now,
100%.
Huh?
No. I was just agreeing. I said 100%. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. There are times for that, and now you have to be very discerning about that and know when those times are at hand. But yeah, I think he made the right decision. I don't think it's always a good idea to be bald, and especially in our world today, and with Black Americans in particular, we have this idea of being real, keeping it real, and that means you kind of let all your in flagrante moments out there. I don't agree with that. I don't think that everything is you know fodder for public consumption.
Hmm. I tend to agree 100%. So yeah, old man agrees that there is, and one thing I tend to emphasize a lot on my channel is that there are no perfect solutions, they're only trade-offs, and that you want, everything is about balance, and some things are irreversible, as we mentioned before, that not every chemical reaction is reversible. So just because you see one thing leading to the other thing does not necessarily mean that the solution is reversible, right? And also, just because you grew up in a milieu that says transparency, transparency, you need to understand that this is not a rational argument. It's a democratic mode of being. In other words, it's a democratic prejudice. It just says, no one ever told you why transparency was the best. They just said transparency, right? And you consume it whole cloth because you grew up in a democratic regime. Well, who told you democracy was the be all end all? No, democracy is a trade-off. So you need to understand that transparency leads to political correctness, leads to groupthink a lot of times. There needs to be a space where nobody sees what's going on in there, so that such that the people whom are in there are free to do what they know is best, as opposed to all the helmets around peeking in and chiming in, right? So another thing is did you learn anything about responsibility in terms of this accident happened to you? There is one way of going, which says, I always use the truck driver. Let me talk like you now. Shout out to Professor Amy Wax. She came up with this truck driver analogy when it comes to fault versus responsibility. Let's say Jeff Bezos, I'm paraphrasing and changing the story now a little bit. Jeff Bezos hits you with a truck, right? He is 100% at fault. It's his fault. He is remorseful. He gives you $1 billion. The court finds him guilty, right? He gives you $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion, whatever it may be, right? He is at fault. But you are still responsible for the physical therapy, are you not? You're still responsible for taking step after grueling step on that treadmill, for changing of your lifestyle in the ways that will be required. You mentioned being a vegetarian and so on and so forth. You're still responsible for going to the therapist, psychological therapist now, for getting over the trauma. No matter how remorseful Jeff Bezos is, and no matter how many billions he puts in your bank account, it cannot do the physical therapy for you. So responsibility always falls on you. You cannot reparations your way into your part, the part that you need to play. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Professor Amy Wax of the University of Pennsylvania Law School. I'm very familiar with it, and I'm very familiar with her, and I agree with her. And it's interesting you bring in the reparations piece. Yes, I mean, we can be made whole again, so to speak, by compensation. But you still have to do the work to get back where you were. And if anybody knows that, it's me. So I definitely agree with that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Snuggles is out there trolling. Yeah, Snuggles, you still got to do your part. Whether Jeff Bezos gives you $1 billion or doesn't give you $1 billion, right? The majority of the work is internal. I always say there's a lot of things in life that's purely internal work that you have to do because the circumstances are what they are. So now you have mentioned that, okay, your project is a positive one. It is a one that does not just look to say, I'm fighting against the image that's out there. You're putting out a positive message. You're putting out a positive message in the light that would encourage people, men, to make change. The refined, rakish rogue, or I heard him recently kind of flip it, if you want to use urban language, to pretty boy, bad boy, and roughneck, right? Similar kind of thing. Those things also are loose references to hierarchies. In other words, there is a hierarchy of the refined, there is a hierarchy of the rakish, right? And hierarchy meaning their values being pursued, virtues required for the attainment of those values, yardsticks for measuring who's on top, who's the most rakish, who's the most refined, and who's the most roughneck, right? So I want to use that as a way of asking you, how important is hierarchy to your project? We've talked about image and how it weaves in this tapestry here. How about hierarchy? Is hierarchy an important part of the message that you're putting out there? And how so?
Yeah, that's another, third rail, I guess, of Black American male discourse, at least online. The idea that there are there's a kind of pecking order among men, and I understand why a lot of guys are kind of resistant to that notion. Um, and I'm reluctant to lean too much on this, but I think it does have a role to play. Black American men for a lot of American history have kind of been, relegated out of um, of American life. That is to say, um, it was not unusual in Black American in American life for entire fields of endeavor to be kind of off limits to Black men until relatively recently. Um, and I can understand that. So, for a lot of Black men, hierarchy kind of smacks of an exclusivity, or as we would call it, elitism and and exclusion, you know. And yeah, in a very real sense, it is exclusionary. Everybody can't be a leader, man. Everybody can't be, or as the phrase would go these days, a high value man. And I think the challenge for a lot of Black men is to kind of do the work to separate, our racial legacy and separate that from the very real reality of hierarchy. I think that's a big challenge moving forward. Hang on a second.
Shout out to Good Ben. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right back. I gotta. To be brutally frank, I gotta go hit the head. I'll be right back.
All right, 100%. So let me go ahead and address some of the things that are being said. Art New Style, if you don't mind elaborating upon what you mean by the Oscar, well, the question that you have put up on there, if you're still in the chat, if you don't mind elaborating upon that. And Good Men, I see you simping out there. You're simping. You are simping in the chat. No shade, bro. Do what you do. Now, the thing about hierarchy that is rather important is that I think that, I asked the question, is hierarchy important? The rakish, roguish, and refined is a way of talking about different groups whom have a different aesthetic in this particular case. But as was mentioned before, an aesthetic, the outward appearance, is a reflection of something that is inner, right? So there are certain differences in values and differences in virtues that are there. One can talk about the priestly hierarchy versus the warrior hierarchy versus the merchant hierarchy. The differences in ends being pursued, hence differences in values, hence differences in the virtues required for the pursuit of these. Now, in order to make hierarchy palatable to the modern man, the modern democratic man, whom I keep on saying, we have prejudices that we think are rational ideas, but they're just prejudices. They're prejudices based on the milieu that you grew up in. As a democratic person, you hear hierarchy and you go, oh my God, that's wrong, right? But if you were raised in an aristocracy, you would just say, yes, of course, hierarchy. But you always need to question the prejudices inherent in the system that you're in. Let me say that again. You always need to question the prejudices inherent in the system that you're in. If the system says transparency is good, ask, why is transparency good? Are there instances where opacity is required? We addressed some of those already. If the system says hierarchy is bad and, let's flatten things and egalitarianism and democracy and blah, 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 ask, are there instances where, it is not so valuable? So one way of making hierarchy palatable is just to understand that when there is any end being pursued, there immediately becomes apparent the fact that there are better ways and worse ways of pursuing those ends. Human beings have to exist pursuing ends, right? We have to make choices as to, what is the end worth pursuing versus another? That immediately creates a hierarchy of values. That's the beginning of hierarchies. And then there are better ways of pursuing it than others. That then creates a hierarchy of ends. And there's always a better person, a better hunter, a better leader, a better rakish, better refined, or better roguish man, right? Hence, this is endemic in the operation of the human biology, if you will. We have to live via choices. We're not just trees planted there, roots down into the soil, get the nutrients, get the sun, and so on and so forth. No, we have to make choices. Do we go left? Do we go right? Is perhaps part of being ambulatory, part of being a mobile creature, and kind of part of a creature that can project into the future. Should I take this path? Should I take that other path? Right? You're immediately creating a hierarchy there of paths, a hierarchy of values, because values are ends worth pursuing, and they're better ends or worse ends based on your choices and the choices of society, and better and worse ways of meeting those ends, hence better and worse people at executing those means, if you will. So that is something that's just one way of just showing the inevitability of hierarchy, such that it's not something about your ego, and your ego need not be all wound up in it. Plus, another thing is pick your hierarchy. If you have picked the priestly hierarchy, for me, number one is philosophy. Number one is shall we say, the scholarly arts, if you will. Well, number one for me is the priestly hierarchy. The next will be the artistic one. And then the next is the merchant one, right? If you look at me, you would think, oh, it's all about money. But no, money is there to serve my philosophical ends and to serve my artistic ends. I know that money is a tool, right? Money is a tool. Hence, with my money, I can do the things that I would like to do, which have to do with ideas and have to do with creativity. So the priests don't go fighting the warriors about who's more alpha, right? There's a different end being pursued, different yardsticks for measurement, different virtues required for the pursuit of these ends. Are you back, Mr. Obsidian Ali?
Yes. Yeah, and that
Okay.
that point that you made, and I heard you talking with Bern. I really enjoy you guys' shows when you do them, and you mentioned this in a previous show you did with Bern. I guess it was maybe a month, 2 months ago at this point, and that was a very, very good distinction. Kevin has gotten into a lot of hot water for what many people call his high value man concept. Now, he's repeatedly stated that is not his. He doesn't own it. He never invented it. He's just merely conveying it. But he's gotten to some hot water because a number of guys kind of roundly reject what he's saying. I think I've always said that Kevin can't do this by himself. It's way too big for any one man to get his arms around alone. He's going to need guys who can jump in and help out. And I think what you did in adding a very important series of distinctions does just that. We need other brothers like yourself following your lead to kind of flesh out what that high value man piece is, point by point, kind of flesh it out. And you did a really good job of fleshing that out, that there are different types of hierarchies, and that it's not a one size fit all, and that the mercantile hierarchy will operate a bit differently than the clerical monarchy and so forth. I thought that was very brilliant on your part.
Yes. Well, well, thank you for putting it that way. So you're saying the hierarchy is an important piece. You're saying that you kind of agree there with Kevin Samuels. Even though he did not say, "Oh, this is particularly mercantile," but I think it's obvious because it's talking about money and networks and so on and so forth. It's very market oriented. You talk about value to the group and all those kinds, very, very market oriented. And anyone with two eyes can see, right? It does not mean that you're a holy man. It does not mean that you are the most alpha priest or whatever it is. Those are different things. So when people start saying, how about the goodness in my heart? It's like, that's a different hierarchy. Those are different ends that are pursued and different sets of virtues that are measuring how close you are to being top dog in there. And you can look at different classes of societies, for example, or different societies. Let's say you look at India. The caste system still exists. Who's at the top? For them, it's the hierarchy of the priests, the Brahmins, the intellectuals, right? And then right
Right.
below that, you have the warrior princes. And then
Right.
below that, you have the mercantile class. Below
That's
that, you have the workers. These are all different classes.
right.
You know, the warrior prince, he goes out there and is like, I got my breastplate. I'm going to beat my breastplate. I just conquered these people, blah, blah, blah. No one is going to judge him on his writings, right? And
Right.
then the same thing with the merchant guy. He's going to be like, I've been able to handle my father's business and expand it over these particular waters and so on and so forth and did this on the trade. And no one is going to judge him on who he conquered lately. So
Yeah.
the idea that people start jumping at a particular hierarchy and saying, "How about my hierarchy?" is it shows a big misunderstanding, a category error, which people tend to make a lot. One of the biggest fallacies in thinking, people making category error and exposing themselves as not being very sophisticated thinkers. But I don't know if I'll give you the last word on that whole hierarchy piece there.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I think, like I said, I think that you're fleshing that out, and you made a really good point with Bernard too about value as well, the importance of providing value to the group, and that gave a chance for Bernard to expand on it. And he talked about he and my collaboration, which has proven very fruitful, and is a very useful example of just that. What Kevin is talking about, providing usefulness to the group, value to the group. That's what's going to be more needed moving forward, is those type of discussions going more in depth on what Kevin has laid down. Because like you said, a lot of black men need to work on being more nuanced, sophisticated thinkers. That's a very important skill set in the age in which we live. We just don't live in a simplistic world anymore. If we ever did, but we certainly don't now. And yeah, we need more sophisticated, nuanced, curious, and deliberative thinkers. And I think what you did was a very important step in that direction.
100%. And then obviously, because I'm seeing already a comment in the chat which takes it further, which is the dissolution of hierarchies, which, by the way, is a hierarchy in and of itself. Those are the artists, okay? The artists are the one who come in and say, all this is rather wacky. They're the ones who come with the postmodernist view. It doesn't have to be explicitly postmodernist. In other words, artists have always been, in a particular way, have a postmodernist lens, in the sense that they look at structures skeptically, and they look and with a piercing view through these structures and the ephemeral nature of them and so on and so forth. And they want to morph and twist things and so on and so forth. And even that, in other words, the best hierarchy breaker, okay, is the best artist. Even that is a hierarchy in and of itself. But first of all, we need to understand the structures before we can begin to look at meta structures and get all deep with it. But first, we need to get out of our feelings with regards to it. If we want to get all philosophical, before you get philosophical, you got to at least get out of your feelings, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's been really disturbing to me over the past year, is the degree to which so many in the black manosphere respond, and it is to Kevin, they respond with so much emotion and very little reason. And that's something that I've committed myself to trying to the best of my ability address, because that is a problem, a big problem.
Since we're talking about this, we're talking about the hierarchy piece. Let's go into something that is also quite contentious, which is money. Okay, now money can be made from the image industry, right? Lifestyle, right? Pushed in magazines, books, so on and so forth. You are, after all, the Obsidian Media Network, right? And selling products, clothes, food, etc., that pushes an image, if you will. You mentioned that image is important, hierarchy is important, hence lifestyle is important. And the media landscape is one that makes its money from image, from pushing a lifestyle that is populated with products to sell, if you will. Any plans to expand your media conglomerate in these directions, and that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah, I most certainly would like to expand. Like right now, the book of Obsidian is not just a book; it's also the launching of my own publishing imprint, Obsidian Media Publications. So my goal in the future is not just to have a kind of place, a publishing house where I publish my own work, but I would like to publish other authors as well. It's the same thing with what I'm doing with the podcasting stuff like that. At some point, I would like others to kind of come under the tent and do stuff. So yeah, I definitely would like to expand it out. Definitely.
Interesting. Now is money a useful ingredient in the pushing of a message? Let me say, for example,
that's another. If I may, that's another very
go ahead.
tender topic for Black men. And again, excuse me, tacking it back to Kevin with the high value thing. It was interesting to me is, on the one hand, a lot of Black men recoiled at the money component. They said, well, 120 or whatever the number is per year, 1,000 per year is too big a number, is too big, too bridge too far. The vast majority of Black men can't do that. And then on the other hand, a lot of Black men gravitated to that 1 point on a 6-point list to the exclusion of all the other 5 points. So it's a very sensitive topic because, again, for much of American history, Black men have been excluded from many of the big money-making ventures in the country. And that has only relatively recently in American life changed or started to change. But the fact remains that, for Black men, you have to have money. And if you're going to get anything done in any major way, you have to either your own money directly or access to other people's money indirectly. And, the events of the past few decades have shown us that most guys who get things done have a combination of both. And let's just get right to something else. And this is something else I've always felt very strongly about with regard to women. I mean, let's face it. Kevin has borne this out over the past year. We can debate it until the cows come home. But the simple truth of the matter is that the ladies would much prefer men who can provide a very nice lifestyle for them. Whether that's right or wrong, we could debate it till the cows come home. But I think no reasonable person can look at the situation right now and look back over the past year of Kevin's truly superlative work in this regard of conducting live form, real-time interviews with Black women and not come away from that simple conclusion that, Black women, they want to be with men who can provide them with a nice lifestyle. That's going to require money, man. A lot of the default setting for men, and I include myself in this, the default setting for men is to kind of be solo and to, kind of be Spartan, we all saw, 300, the movie, and I enjoyed it too. But I mean, the reality is that women don't want to live like that. It looks cool and all that, but they don't really want to live like that. They want to live in as luxurious a surrounding as possible. And that's just the plain truth. And in order to do that, you have to have some ends meeting. So, and that's a great topic for a lot of Black men.
Yeah, you put it in a rather provocative way, in the sense that there are checks on, if you will, on the 7 deadly sins, or not all sins have to do with desire, but these particular ones have to do with desire. Hypergamy is natural, right? There are checks that we put on our nature, right? And the unchecked nature, if you will, tends to be referred to as sins writ large across many different cultures, if you will. So, however, to say that it's not necessary, in other words, that, a lot of times cultures, especially the body politic, is built on the sins, the natural proclivities of people. Call it rational self-interest, for example, right? What is rational self-interest other than just what I want, right? My stomach, right? Rational self-interest is the philosophy of the stomach, but it has to be checked, obviously, right? Don't kill him just to feed your stomach, but, pursue the ends that your stomach wants in a particular way. But 100% you're correct, right? But before we continue this, let me go ahead and read some of the super chats here. Shout out to Dr. Thunder saying here, with the $5 super chat saying here, and the rewards and benefits will be different. I'm assuming, speaking of the different hierarchies, the different hierarchies have different goals that they're pursuing, different means of getting there, and different rewards will be given to the priest versus the warrior versus, so on and so forth, right? And I believe that we have a couple from K Polymath with the pounds over here. K Polymath, the artist formerly known as Massage Noir. I know he has been on your channel a couple of times, but that's him, by the way. He's hiding with a different name. Shout out to K Polymath accusing me of starting a cult. But if you're here, are you supporting the movement? Are you supporting the? Are you therefore supporting the cult? Thank you very much for the super chat. Shout out to you. And over here we also. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Were you gonna?
No,
I think that was just an echo.
I was listening to you.
Gotcha. I heard an echo. Every pound counts. Okay, go ahead and hit the super chat. And right in line comes Mr. Jonathan Barronville with the. Oh, am I missing something? Yeah, I think Jonathan Barronville is over here hitting a super chat as well and says, "My brother K Polymath is right. Stop being broke. Hit the damn super chat." Thank you very much, gentlemen, for doing this. So we were talking about money. Okay, we're talking about money, and then you said, hey, stop getting all hung up about money, and so on and so forth. It is a very tangled topic, not because it's very complicated, but because of people's emotions. And I have no interest in this particular discussion to untangle people's emotions. I'm particularly not in the mood tonight or this evening. But let's talk about money being important for the pushing of a movement, right? So let's say you want to do something political, if you will. You want to project an image. You want to do something. You want to fund the postmodernist movement, and you go to George Soros or something like that, and he funds it. I'm sure he has something that he's getting from it as well. In other words, the market is a great way of on the one hand having an agenda to push, and then on the other hand selling stuff. Let's say you want to push a particular image, as we've talked about before. Image is a particular thread in the tapestry of your mission, right? With that will come a magazine that pushes a particular image, a particular publishing house that publishes books that brand the image in a particular way. And these things have to be profitable. If they're not profitable, the movement does not work. It's not just a question of charity, a question of kumbaya, let's come together and hotep our way to victory. In other words, you need to show that it is valuable and self-sustaining. In other words, the marketplace is a good barometer for checking the sustainability, for encountering the environment, the ecosystem, if you will, to see how to pivot and move and so on and so forth, right? And we will come back, and we know that the market system is not the be-all and end-all, okay? We're not stupid over here. But that it is a good way of making sure that what you're going to do works. I want an image. I create a magazine. I have to make sure the magazine sells. I have to put products in there that highlight the particular image I'm trying to promote, and that has to sell. I'm going to promote certain kinds of restaurants, certain kinds of food, certain kinds of clothing per se, right? Or something like that. A lot of people are asking about the kaftan that I wore, that I in somewhere on YouTube. One of my pictures, O'Shea Duke Jackson also put it up in his community tab, and people, person after person, asking, where can I get that? Where can I get that? Right? So if that is part of an image thing, that's part of a brand thing, that's part of a movement, well, we have to make it also financially feasible so that it becomes self-sustaining and snowballs. Any comments on this, pushback, or what are your thoughts regarding money? Yeah. And the marketplace being essential for the pushing of a movement, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, the simple. I never saw what I did as a movement, but a lot of guys do for whatever reason. My thinking is, however you choose to look at it, you need money in order for it to run. So, if it's not going to be, because there's some guys who kind of take umbrage with me and others looking at this as a money-making enterprise, they see that they have a dim view of that. They think that it should be more along the lines of a nonprofit. Well, nonprofits still have to get money. So If you're not going to be a for-profit operation,
Non-profit is just a tax designation. It does not
Right.
mean that you don't make profit or it's not a business. It's just a way of telling the government. It's just a way. It's just a box you check.
right,
That's it.
and you still have to get funding somehow. So if you're not going to get funding directly in the form of customers and advertisers, then you have to get money in the form of grants and things. You have to get funding somehow. And there are guys who I don't think they don't understand it. I think they just don't want to accept it. And there are a lot of guys who are trying to get over, and they get angry with me because I call them out for that. I'm here to make money. This is a money-making enterprise. I see no reason. I call it the Oprah test. Oprah made big money catering to a black female audience to this very day, and nobody has a problem with it. There should be no problem with black men like me, Kevin, O'Shea, and others who cater to a black male audience and make a truckload of money. There should be no problem with that. If Oprah can do it with black women, how come black men can't do it with black men?
If you have a beef with Oprah, it's not the fact that she's making money. It's the message, right? If you had a message, and let me then begin to creep into the counterpoint, which is also valid. Is it possible that it is not possible to have a utilitarian message? Let's just use utilitarian as a measure of the good for the masses, if you will, for a particular cohort of people. You cannot have a good message and also it being profitable. In other words, you cannot be an Oprah Winfrey, right? And also be putting things out there that are beneficial. It has to be somehow tainted. Any thoughts on that?
Well, Oprah has kind of earned a reputation, I guess, among many black men for being kind of anti-black men. So yeah, there's some truth to that. That being said, though, I don't think that just because you cater to certain demographic means that you're automatically anti other demographics. The two can be mutually exclusive.
And competition may not be a bad thing in that regard, right?
No, absolutely not. But yeah, but you are right about one thing. I've noticed guys don't have a problem with Oprah making big money. As a matter of fact, I'll take it a step further. Guys don't have a problem with guys like Derrick Jackson making big money off of black women. But guys seem to have a problem with brothers making money off of black men, though. And that's just fascinating to me. It's a quirk in the psychology that I find fascinating.
Interesting. And we'll get a little deeper into this. Let me read some more super chats. Thank you very much, K. Polymath, for dropping the foreign currency on us. You are asking, where does this super chat money go? Okay, what any plans? So, okay, I have a Patreon, okay? And in there is a way to more sustainably support where we're going with this. There is going to be in the Patreon and in conjunction a Discord server, your ability to shape the direction of the show. And also there's going to be consultancy. Yes, I said that, okay? You're here for the gems that I drop, whether it be on the sales end of things, on the mastery of subjective consciousness end of things. Yes. If I must save myself, I do know a thing or two about a thing or two, and I know what the hell I'm talking about. So if you want to influence the direction of the show, go ahead, join the Patreon. If you want to be able to build the consultancy infrastructure and possibly then have, maybe some seminars and so on, a meetup somewhere, various places and so on and so forth, where we can continue to build, bring in speakers, do things like that. That is the plan for this channel. In other words, there are going to be many organs there. And also my talk about that kaftan business, that's going to happen as well. Okay. I'm in talks already with the person who sold mine, the Wakanda gear. And you guys will be able to get either, pick your specific size, or you pick a custom made thing, anything from like $50 all the way to $1,000, depending on what you're trying to do, right? What kind of swag you're trying to have with regards to those kaftan suits. So that is exactly what I'm planning with this channel. Go check out the Patreon, and your support is going towards a suitable end, if you will. Shout out also to the technological chaos. Says even there are hierarchies in biological processes/systems. Example, right? Our existence would not be whole if our parents didn't choose to procreate. One cannot state that classism is necessarily a concern of morality. It's a feature Thank you. Thank you very much for the comment and the super chat. $20 definitely puts you in the sponsor of the show category, sir. So, yes, yes, yes. Let's push a little bit further into this idea of money, right? But before we go there, let's talk about the mainstreaming of the space. It's something that people talk about. Okay, what comes to mind? Okay, what comes to mind when you hear that phrase, going mainstream?
Yeah, I've been
Is it
thinking
even
about
is it even applicable? Like, go ahead.
yeah, I've been thinking about that. I've been wondering about that for quite some time. My question becomes, why is it so for the guys who? Because I've heard a number of people, as you know, Kevin now has crossed the 1 million mark on YouTube. And in the months running up to it, guys are saying, you know, the black manosphere be mainstream and so forth. Kevin go mainstream, me the black manosphere go mainstream and so forth. I'm really interested in the idea that why is it so important for us to go mainstream? And the somewhat obvious answer is because a lot of black men feel that they're not being heard,
Mm-hmm.
that their concerns are not being heard, and that we're not you know getting what we feel we need to get. And I'm somewhat empathetic and sympathetic to that. But on the other hand, my position is, well, we're the mainstream that we've been looking for. So, like, I never got into this so that I could get recognition from ABC.
Mm-hmm.
My thinking is, if you want recognition from ABC, then go to ABC.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can't speak for Kevin on this point or anyone else in the black manosphere on this point. I can only speak for myself. I never got into this so I could get, you know, mainstream recognition from fill in the blank. My thinking is we could build what we needed to do on our own and kind of build our own mainstream. So I guess to me, the question is, what is meant by mainstream? To me, mainstream means we build our own thing and do our own thing, and everybody's checking us out. So what does mainstream mean to these other guys?
What does mainstream mean? So if we were to try to find out the adjacent definition of mainstream, right? Rather than, in other words, one definition is, you know, particular organs, particular channels, particular medium, a particular medium or media, right? Being on CNN, for example, being on CBS. That's one kind of definition. Another definition, it will be in popular culture, if you will, which is just a numbers thing, right? So what are your thoughts regarding the numbers aspect? And also, is it necessary to water things down when you pour them into that broad stream? Or shall we say, you know, I've been using the word movements, but let's just stick with that. Can movements such as this be mainstream even? Or is the mainstreaming enough to be a niche such that you have this whole thing over here, people are getting million subs and so on and so forth. There's no need to switch media, go somewhere else. But also, it's not going to be in the broad popular culture per se. What are your thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, I think it's very possible for us to do things and have it at a fairly, you know, highbrow level. I think one of the big problems that have kind of plagued black men is the lack of not doing that. You know, kind of, you know, going the route of least resistance, I think has kind of, you know, stymied us to some extent. We need to be able to kind of elevate a bit. So I think it's possible that we can do that, and I think we should.
I think that this is a key point here by Mr. 100 Crypto saying experts. That is that's a valid dimension of mainstream. In other words, I think that's a brilliant one, right? Because we talked about these particular media, and they do kind of bestow an expertise or a particular kind of status, if you will, even though, you know, people may not be real experts there. But also having real experts such that it can be verified, peer reviewed, authors such as yourself, having our own set of, if you will, public intellectuals that are out there is another kind of a way of mainstreaming. What do you have to say about that comment?
Yeah, yeah. We do need experts, and I believe in the idea that cream always rises to the top in any endeavor, and the Black Manosphere is no exception. We'll have the various experts and leaders will bubble up organically on their own over time, and that's a good thing, and that will continue to occur as time goes on. That's a good thing.
100%. Shout out to K Polymath. I'm not going to read your super chat over there talking about taking advantage of the people in your Barronville. And then shout out to our to good men out here simping today. Kevin Samuels has a Reddit page. He has a definition on Urban Dictionary. Made in game, so on and so forth, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. Someone also mentioned that Shaq mentioned Kevin Samuels or referred to Kevin Samuels and so on and so forth. This is enough of a niche, enough of a side tributary river over there that the mainstream pays attention to. That is key. That is key there. So let's go down that or continue down this path of the money talk. Okay, we already talked about that a system of self-interest is a system of self-interest. The information that one gets from the market, the sustainability that one gets in the market is necessary for spearheading things, both in the environment that we find ourselves in, and also just as an artifact of trial and error over millennia. In other words, the marketplace, decentralized information sharing, so on and so forth, exchange of value, blah, 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 whereby people are pursuing rational self-interest, does yield results and it does yield a lot of information. Can you imagine a better way to tweak capitalism, if you will, in order to better serve human ends? For example, capitalism might not promote or incentivize the production of the best art, right? Capitalism might not incentivize the development of healthy aristocracy, okay? What do I mean by that? In other words, healthy hierarchies of certain kinds. By best art, I just mean, generally speaking, popular culture, popular art, popular music is mediocre by definition, right? So using the marketplace, using things that are marketable to the average helmet person out there is not necessarily going to have the cream rise to the top per se, right? So how does the cream rise to the top in that situation? How does one encourage the breeding of traits? Now, just let's talk pure aristocracy, for example. The breeding of traits that aim high in the hierarchy, things such as the priestly hierarchy or the warrior class set of virtues, are not particularly marketable, but those are things that are healthy for a society, right? So now this is a big thing that may get you into commenting, generally speaking, about the Enlightenment Project and the critiques of it. But how does one promote these things that are not necessarily promoted by capitalism or the marketplace, a la great art, great cultural artifacts, or aristocratic hierarchies, for example?
Yeah, there's a he's now deceased, and he's also a fellow homeboy. His name was Walter Williams, and
yeah.
yeah, he used to teach at he taught at Temple for a while, but he's best known for teaching over at George Mason University, and he made a really good point that capitalism is best suited to understand and take advantage of human nature. You mentioned it earlier, rational self-interest. So you have an interest in making money. But in order for you to do that in a capitalistic framework, you have to help other people get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
You have to help other people get what they want in order for you to get what you want. And so, in human history, over the past century, has proven that capitalism is the best way to address human needs, more so than socialism, communism, and so forth. We had that big, fight with the Soviet Union, that sort of thing. So I think that that yes, capitalism can be um, abused. There can be shortcomings with it. A big issue of our day right now is the idea that um, of income inequality. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Still, with all that being said, the single biggest um, liberator, I guess you could say, of humanity has been capitalism. It hasn't been all these other different isms. It's been capitalism. Capitalism has freed more people around the world than anything else. And
Mm.
with regard to Black Americans, right here, I mean, we're the taken as a group, we're the most successful Black people on the planet. You know, where else could a Barack Obama have happened? Where else could a Jay-Z have happened? Where else could a Oprah have happened, and so on. So yeah, I think that that capitalism is a force for good. Is it without its problems? No. Do we need to be vigilant for signs of abuse and stuff like that? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is it perfect? No. But on balance, when we look at it, it's done more for more people than any other monetary type of system, and it's a good thing.
Gotcha. So, all right then, Rush Limbaugh, and no shade at you, but you know it's relevant because Walter Williams used to fill in for Rush Limbaugh. If you know
Indeed, he
that,
did.
right?
Indeed, he did.
Yeah. But all right then, Rush Limbaugh, you are giving me an economic and political argument for why capitalism perhaps is capital. Let's broaden it a little bit. We're talking about liberal democracy slash the market type system, the Enlightenment project, if you will. Right? That's what we're talking about, and you're giving me a good argument from a political slash economic point of view, from the stomach point of view, if you will, why that is the case. But I said it is not a question of abuse or not that makes it such that capitalism will not promote the best art, right? It's not because capitalism is being abused. We're not throwing shade at capitalism. It's just the case that the democracy, in other words, the leveling, the egalitarian impulse of, yes, you give people what they want, but it is not going to promote certain kinds of cream to rise to the top. It may give you nice iPads, but it's not going to give you some of the more useless things, such as art, philosophy, and a noble spirit, right? Those things are not iPads, right? And how do you, if you will, how do you get those things? You could perhaps say your family structure and this and that and the other, or religion, or so on and so forth, right? What are the other what are the other means, the other institutions, the other ways or modalities by which we can cultivate these other goods, if you will?
I think that the great thing about the American project, the American experiment, it was that it kind of took all of these things into account. Unlike the Soviet Union, which kind of divorced matters of the spirit, matters of the sublime. You know, what is a good life, as Plato, I believe it was Plato, or maybe it might have been Aristotle. I'm not sure. It's getting late. It's talked about. They tried to divorce those things from a purely economic or monetary pursuit. Here in the United States, and to a lesser extent, the West, we attempted to try to temper economics with these other things. So I think it's possible, and in its best sense, the American project kind of bakes it in the cake that you kind of consider factors other than purely monetary. Now again, you know, we have our problems. It's not perfect. But the great thing about the American project is that we can, and as Stanley Crouch once famously said, who's now also deceased, we have an instrument to, you know, right the wrongs of the past and the wrongs of the present. And the founding fathers made it such that we would have that instrument to be able to take on whatever challenges face us. that we can get the job done. We can solve problems. That's the great as Stanley Crouch put it, and I wholeheartedly agree. That's the fundamental power of the American democracy is our capacity to solve problems. We can get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I like what K Polymath said in conjunction with what you said here. He is saying, no, well, capitalism takes care of the base. You've mentioned the taking care of the base, the economic/political project, best that we have. To quote Churchill, not great, it's horrible, but it's the best that we know. And that when that base is taken care of, it then allows for the experimentation, and that it does indeed produce this nobility of spirit from those whom are been free to experiment and so on and so forth. In other words, when the system is working correctly, I may be curious as to find out what K Polymath means by the system working correctly and that which will make it not work correctly. But that capitalism as a base does allow the white space, if you will, for these things to emerge. So I'm glad that you addressed that question. Obviously, it's not a simple one. You're talking about the whole Enlightenment project and how does one and the things that it is missing when compared with, let's say, an aristocracy. Of course, aristocracy also missing all kinds of crap as well. There are no.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's something that has to be the Enlightenment. What I'm about to say may not be very popular in to be brutally frank, Black American circles, especially at a time where being woke is kind of like a watchword. But I mean, the Enlightenment rests on an assumption, and that assumption is that it is something that is constantly being renewed by people standing up for it. The Enlightenment is not a self-evident thing. You study human history, the Enlightenment is the exception to the rule, not the norm. So, we have to constantly, democracy itself is not something that is naturally occurring in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So the natural occurring state in humanity is, ruled by divine right of kings. And we know how that worked out. So, I mean, I am a child of the West. I am a child of Athens and Jerusalem. I am a child of the scientific method. I am a child of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. I'm a child of the founding fathers. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And it's important for people like myself to stand up for that. I don't see that as a weakness. I see it as a strength. That's a good thing.
Okay, let's continue down that path. Okay, I dropped the link there, Dr. Thunder, K Polymath. And as you all know, I'm very selective with the people. I don't do panels over here, okay, because I know how y'all Negroes be. And obviously, if you listen to my channel, and those of you whom are new, I'm sure there's some new people here. Please go ahead and subscribe. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button and all. Over here, we talk about being better and doing better. We try to expand our minds. We try to talk unencumbered, unabashedly about ideas and about ways of improving our being, okay? Both from a being standpoint and also from a doing standpoint. So let me press on. You just talked about the scientific method, right? You talked about the scientific method. How about the pushback from a postmodernist point of view that says, hey, Obsidian, all that rationality thing that you're doing, it's all just sophistry, okay? And it's all really about power. Groups subjugating other groups. Logic is a tool of power, okay? And hence, rhetoric devoid of logic is just as useful a tool for me, okay? If I want to talk about other ways of knowing and let's look at the Native American ways of knowing or the other ways of knowing or whatever ways of knowing, right? Then that is just as fine. In other words, I'm sure you're quite aware of the postmodernist pushback in this particular narrow way of looking at things, right? The postmodernism is rather manifold. But this whole thing about, look, you're talking about logic and rationality and so on and so forth, that is just an instrument of the power dynamic, blah, blah, blah. What do you have to say about that?
Show me the postmodernist businessman who has to meet payroll predicated on postmodernist thinking. Show me the postmodernist surgeon who has to save a life on the operating table predicated on postmodernist thinking. show me the postmodernist architect. Maybe there was a postmodernist architect that caused the collapse of a building down there in Miami-Dade. That predicated their building of a structure on postmodernist thought. I say all that to say that, it sounds great in the abstract until you actually have to get things done in the real world. And that's what the scientific method is all about, a way of testing, actually ways of trying to disprove your ideas in the real world.
I see. That's a good one. You brought me up. I'm an engineer. I'm a practical person. You pulled me down and were like, hey. You did the Aristotle pulling Plato down thing. Like, come down here. Tell me your way of building a structure by other ways of knowing, right? Good point. Dr. Thunder, welcome. You hopped in before K Polymath, so you get the first word. What you got for us, sir?
First, I want to say this has been a very interesting conversation. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting conversation. Congratulations again, Obsidian, the best-selling book.
Hey, Doc, thank you.
Yeah. Gonna have to have you back on the show, on my show sometime soon here.
Yeah, looking forward.
Yeah. So I want to digress a bit. You were talking about this whole idea of mainstreaming of the red pill or the manosphere, and I liked your point about your desire was not necessarily to defining mainstreaming as becoming of note on ABC or something, because of course that would mean that you would have to play the ABC game, and then therefore this is my thought, therefore the the message would be lost or diluted in some way. For instance, Shaq mentioning KS and telling the other lady on the broadcast that she was average at best. That seems like maybe that's a positive thing in one sense, but on the other side of this, maybe it's not particularly positive. One thing I've been concerned about with Kevin and his sort of meteoric rise is that it wouldn't take much, and they've tried a lot, but it wouldn't take much for the whole thing to get derailed and deflated. And so this, so as important
Are you
as
talking about
the
a
message
caricaturing, a clowning, a cartooning of the whole thing? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that and just taking things out of context, the usual character assassination, the usual folks creating straw men of the arguments, and then attacking the straw man. And since the general public is not going to do their requisite homework, it's very easy to make things look pedestrian and look silly and look misogynistic and all of that kind of stuff that they're going to say. So I actually been kind of concerned that when is this going to happen? Because these conversations that we have in this space, these conversations, it's the only time in my lifetime that folks have felt the liberty to say, with regularity, the kinds of things that you hear in the space, and it's really needed. And if you want to go political with this, the Dems and the Republicans have not done a particularly good job of hearing the voice of black men. And so it's like, this is our chance, and it's like, if this goes away, then what? There's a little bit of that sort of hiding under the bed, so to speak.
So let's
I
ask
just
our
wondered,
guests to
what do you think?
Yeah, so that's how guests to react to that in the sense
Yeah.
of, okay, well, even Shaq saying stuff like average at best, it may just not just be like a, oh, that little thing over there, Pepe the Frog, certain other things that you could just make fun of that come out of places such as Reddit or Fortran or whatever. Yeah, just make fun of it. It's mainstream, but it's the butt of a joke. What do you have to say about that, Obsidian? And then we'll go to K Polymath.
Um, yeah, there's always the need to kind of I guess you could call it police oneself, or have a kind of policing mechanism. Um, I don't want to be too or sound too authoritarian with it, because it's always a danger of going too far in the other direction. But yeah, I do agree that you do need to kind of have some kind of mechanism to kind of keep you on message and keep you on target.
Hmm. Stay on message, stay on target, military precision, hierarchy, and so on and so forth. That is the anecdote. That is the pushback. That is the mechanism by which these kinds of attacks, if you will, can be combated. That's the point?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. K Polymath, what you got for us, sir?
Hey, what's up, Ike? And congratulations again, Mr. Oman. I think the fruits of your labor is your vineyard is finally growing and the wine is tasting good. So congratulations again.
Thank you.
And yeah, I wanna go back a little bit to parts of the earlier parts of the conversation. So let's talk about the Obsidian Media Network 2 and Ike's thing that he's trying to build as well, and just generally the manosphere. What I don't want to see is another BET situation where an external investor comes along and buys up the project. What I want to see is more of a what's that guy called? Jay-Z type situation where he maintains ownership of his own thing. Meaning, I want there to be an improvement in everyone's shows to the point whereby someone can come in, other brothers, it could be the chat users can buy up a specific kind of media. What do you call it? A type of system. Man, I'm not speaking properly. Let me talk again.
I know it's late over there. You should be
Right.
sleeping. We're
Yeah.
talking about equity or something. Go ahead.
Yeah, yes. But what I'm trying to say here is that we have Kevin Samuels. He is a brand. His videos date back a couple years of high quality videos. What happened with Joe Rogan is he was offered $100 million for all of his videos dating back 11 years. A lot of brothers in this stream have high quality videos, which then some investor will undoubtedly offer them a lot of money to sell their videos and their rights. What I'm trying to say is that somehow we need to make sure that enough brothers are out here being able to create this platform, and then we can definitely make sure that we're the ones who own it. We can give the content creators their due, yet we still maintain the culture around what made the space so great. Right now, long form conversations like what we're having right now is doing extremely well. We're able to articulate high level conversations, solve problems, and also just entertain people in a way. People are now working with music in their headphones. Instead, they're listening to people like you three. So the point here is there needs to be a very deliberate, very purposeful, very precise attack on this whole situation, whereby we can build a network, make sure that, let's say, a simple example of this network is, well, okay, you have Ike, you have Dr. Thunder for the intellectual space, you have Oman for the Renaissance, right? How the modern black man is, the whole intellectualism, entertainment, and all that stuff. You have Kevin Samuels there for his thing. You have Bernard there for his Good Morning Show. You have all these shows in there. Anyone can click on the whatever, go and listen to each. It's very organized, works well, good quality, all of that. Good money in there. We get mainstream services and marketing. Do it nicely, organize it well. I think that's the future. And if we don't jump on it as brothers out here, someone else will. I'm not wooing here. This is literally what will happen. People like Kevin, people like Oman, people like Ike, people like Dr. Thunder are soon going to be offered a lot of money to go down that direction. What I want to obviously share here is how do we maintain our cultural integrity so that we don't so-called sell out. Again, I don't think selling out is a bad thing. That's not the point here. The point here is how can we
the price just
maintain
has to be
such-
right?
Well, yes, but how can we make sure that the price, we can circumvent the price that gets offered?
Okay, so yeah, go ahead, old man. Are you gonna sell the Obsidian Media Network and Publishing House anytime soon?
No.
Conciseness is much appreciated. So we have another person joining us. I believe the name is Uncle Ruckus. I recognize that moniker. Can you say something?
Yes, sir. What's up?
What is up? Can you introduce yourself and give us your point, sir?
It's actually JB. I'm just.
All right. Go ahead, JB. Do your thing.
So I do have a question for Obsidian. So I'm curious, Obsidian. Have you checked? It may not matter to you, right? But I was, taking a look at your on your book on your Amazon page, right? And because I bought a few copies and I was about to write a review, and I was just out of curiosity. I'm like, okay, let me go read the reviews. And it's kind of funny that we have misogynoir here because I'm seeing a lot of that word in your reviews. The word misogynoir. And I guess I'm curious, based on the topic, based on what Dr. Thunder was mentioning about the derailment. Like, I'm curious how you feel about the potential of, like there's one review, for example, that clearly came after Kevin recommended your book, right? And it's a negative review, and it's kind of like just the whole, again, it's expected, but I'm curious how you feel about that. How you feel about just a group of people who are probably going to just pick up your book just to write a review, or just go and write a review. Essentially, it's just to try to mess up your or misrepresent your message, right? Misrepresent what you're actually saying, and just call you, misogynoir and all that other nonsense. Yeah, I'm just curious.
First, I'll sue him for stealing my name.
Yeah. I think that the way to combat that is to have people write countervailing reviews. I think the more that more guys write countervailing reviews, that's the solution to guys like the one that you're talking about.
That's a good point, and it is right in line with technological chaos here. Shout out for the $5 super chat. Round of applause to you, saying that the core consumer/fan bases are the best offense/defense, for against the mainstream character assassination and so on and so forth. So you go out there, you leave your countervailing review, and you encourage others to do so. And that is a good Jonathan Barronville. Does that make sense to you? And then we'll go to Dr. Thunder for any either rebuttal. Was the question that you had asked regarding the belittling of things answered appropriately? Any secondary comments, ask questions, and then misogynoir. So Jonathan Barronville, does that make sense as far as the countervailing?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. It does make sense, and I mean I plan on doing that. Honestly, I haven't actually finished reading the book yet, so that's why I wanna actually wait. I was gonna write it, but then I'm like, if to actually counter what I realized, I was gonna write kind of a surface level review, to be quite honest, and then I realized, you know what, the best way to actually counter the stupidity of some of these reviews is to actually come back and write a more detailed review where I break down, at least my understanding of the book, and you know what I'm saying, like in a more detailed fashion, rather than just saying, hey, great book, 5 stars. It's just I'd rather do something more detailed, than at least somebody reading that, if they're objective enough, they can say, okay, this is not just a fanboy, this is not just somebody quote unquote writing Obsidian. This is actually somebody who's read the book, etc. So that's that I think that's where I stand on that. And I guess one more quick question for Obsidian. Obsidian, are you sure about what you just said? Because I'm curious. If so, you're saying right now, if somebody pulled up and say, hey, Obsidian, I got $10 million right now, cash, wire to your bank account, cash, you don't ever have to work ever again in your life. In fact, it comes with a $2 million house, a chauffeur for life, and a chef. You're not selling out.
No.
You're not Uncle Ruckus it.
No.
Well, I guess I'll keep my house.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, you keep it. You're not getting. You're gonna need to try harder, Jonathan Barronville. So you had your comment, your question, and a secondary question. So I'm gonna go now to back to Dr. Thunder, and then to K Polymath again, and then we'll have our final thoughts from the special guest of honor himself.
Okay, yeah. So, uh, so two things I wanted to say. So one is let us help Ike Ogiamian get to 4,000 subscribers. He's very close. He's at 3.9K right now. Let's help him get to 4,000. So, likes are free and all of that, but hit the subscription button, subscribe. If you've been here all of this time and you're not subscribed, please do so. It's great content. It's always good information. And, Ike and I have a show every week on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The show's called Getting Ish Done. Right now we're talking on the value of hard work. Okay, so the for Obsidian, you made a comment, and it might have been a month ago or something that I heard you initially make this comment, and then you sort of made it again today, and that was the comment about if Oprah has been allowed to make money basically in service of Black women. And the guests that she has are have a particular perspective and definitely a biased sort of viewpoint that sort of support the way that she sees sees things, then why do we have an issue as Black men with the same sort of thing? Why is it a bad thing for Black men to profit? Creating, content in service of Black men. I'm good with that assessment so long as we as Black men are not doing it in the same sort of biased manner. It seemed that your comments about it previously were said in such a way to suggest that you're okay with the bias. Like if our sort of agenda is biased and all we care about is a particular perspective and we want to kind of do the same kind of thing. Well, here's a business model that works. Oprah did it. If we just kind of emulate that, is that what you were saying, or I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, it's inherently biased. I mean, we're advocates. Oprah is the advocate, so are we, and it will have inherent biases. We're not. This is national public radio, and I think that that need not be a bad thing. The one problem that I've had over the years is this idea that there are some Black men who seem apprehensive about being balls out with, after looking out for their own interests. One thing that I do admire Black women for, in this case Oprah, is that they have no reservations about the fact that they look out for what's in their best interest. When are Black men going to do the same?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I have decided myself, and this has been a pretty recent development. I've become much more assertive and aggressive in saying this in public, that if a particular policy, if I don't see how it specifically helps, serves Black men and boys, then I'm not a fan. I will not support the policy. If it's associated with any of these code words, Black family, we know that doesn't mean men. That's women and children, and in particular, it's women and daughters, right? Because the Black boys are going to grow up to be Black men. So if a policy does not have that as a central focus, then it's not something that I'm going to be in support of. And I've just seen too often that this sort of momentum generated by some of these atrocities, stuff that's happened to black men, mass incarceration, police brutality, and everything else. What ends up happening is our interests don't get served because we're too kind of egalitarian, too fair. We're too interested in everybody else's issues that our own issues end up not being served.
Well stated.
I agree. Listen, man, it's been a really great time here. I got to get out of here. I'm running out of gas. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and we got to do this again sometime.
Indeed. Thank you very much. And you guys should go out there and get the Kindle, or place the order for when he gets back. We did not get to ask about the mechanics behind the reordering of new copies and so on and so forth. All those technicalities. We'll be sending out an invitation to you next time. Shout out to everybody who participated in the chat, the super chats, and so on and so forth. You feel free, old man, to go ahead and take your well-deserved nap out there in Philly. We know that it's pretty late. And shout out to the panelists. Shout out to those who super chatted. Shout out to those who cash apped. I've not checked that yet, and perhaps I should check that right now. And let me see those who participated in the chat, those who are watching in the clouds. Yes, I'm going ahead and I heard this particular spiel from Game Changer, the way he kind of does this kind of acknowledgement of the different people. I need to come up with mine. So shout out to those who cash apped, super chatted, participated in the chat, watch from the clouds, so on and so forth. We will be back, okay, I believe on Tuesday with Dr. Thunder, as he referenced already, with our show Getting Ish Done. And we shall bid you adieu with the usual outro. Thanks again to Obsidian, the old man, the spearheader. Congratulations on your best-selling book. Shout out. You are very welcome, sir.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Shout out to D with the super chat. Shout out to Jonathan Barronville again for the several super chats and so on and so forth. Okay. So, the system is coming. The system is coming for all. They're praying and chanting and drumming. With gladness they welcome the fall. The preachers and pilgrims will pillage. The pilots will drop down their bombs. Corruption will swallow the village. With blood we shall right all our wrongs. The toil of the farmers, the work of informers. Paradigms and fables hoisted upon us. Searchlight is searching, police they are lurking. Legislators from the dark side emerging. Ghetto bird word for the masses. I come fi tell the ghetto youth say this year Roblox no fee past this. Ghetto a bad word for the children. They're terrorizing everybody with no feeling. Get a bad word over Zion. Reconstitute a higher height that we can gather and rely on. Get a bad word I call out. Get a bad word I ball out. The people are saying their words have no meaning no more. Believers and preachers are praying, but God has been dead for so long, replaced by the sign of the dollar, and nation and duty and all. They're fighting for concept and color, rejecting the beauty of all. The toil of the farmers, work of informers, paradigms and fables hoisted upon us. Searchlight is searching, police they are lurking, legislators from the dark side emerging. Know what I'm saying?